Hello and welcome to this webinar regarding Google Drive permission. It's hosted by Refractive in conjunction with G Suite Tips. We're starting just about on time, so thanks everybody for attending. I'm sure people will join as we go through. My name is Sean Power and I'm one of the business development managers here at Refractive. So this is the agenda for today's session. And we'll discuss the options available for sharing documents in Google Drive, what is best practice, and some of the things that can go wrong. There is a little bit noise on the line. Can mark it in, just make sure you're muted, please. We'll then spend some time giving a live demonstration of a tool to help manage these permissions. So you can actually see it in action, which is usually the best way. And then we'll discuss the pricing of this tool, and we'll include a special offer, I think as we mentioned in our communications, just for today's webinar attendees. You can ask any questions which you want to ask in the YouTube page. So in the upper right-hand corner of the page, there's a chat box. So just put your questions in there. We'll try to answer as many as we can during the session. If we don't get through them all, then we will come back and answer them after the session. We've scheduled 30 minutes for the session today. We've actually got plenty to get through, including a number of topics. So I'll go ahead and make a start. On this call, we have two of my colleagues, Ian Weatherhog, our Chief Technology Officer, and Mark Williams, one of our senior consultants. I'm going to be discussing the general Google Drive sharing options. Ian's going to take you through the demonstration of a tool to assist with this data security, and then all three of us will be available for questions at the end of the session today. So you should get the answers to the questions that you're asking. Sharing assets from Google Drive, it can be a wonderful experience. The ability to collaborate with other users, both inside and outside the organization. It means that more people can be involved in these decisions without compromising either the quality or the delivery of its speed. There are times, however, it's not always easy to ensure that documents are shared in the correct manner. So we're going to explore some of these options as we go through. And it all starts with the share button. This is where we invite other users into your documents and allow them to view the information and edit if given the right permission. And from here, from this share button, you can add in individuals into the document, as you can see, and you can give them either edit, comment, or view only rights. Collaborators can have different access rights depending on how they will be interacting with the document. And sharing best practice, it would dictate that providing editing rights is kept to a minimum of collaborators. And the other options that you have, including viewing and commenting, really allow you to just keep editors down to a minimum. So you're inviting people to see the information, but not necessarily change it. You can also share a document to all your users on your domain, or even make it available publicly. When sharing publicly, you can allow anyone to access the document, or you can insist that they have to have the document link in order to access the asset. And this is quite a common question about what the difference is between sharing publicly on the web and sharing anybody with the link. And essentially, sharing a document publicly, it enables the document to be indexed by search engines, so it may be found by random people. Now, that can be great. It's useful for documents such as press releases that you do want as wide an audience as possible. But it may not be so good if the data should be kept private or it's of a sensitive nature. Sharing the link means that these access to the document, is restricted to the user, and they will need to click on the link to the document in order to access it. And these documents cannot be indexed. So it gives you a level of security above publicly shared documents, but still more security is needed. In either of these cases, it's not secure and caution is definitely needed, and users don't need to sign in to their Google account in order to access the assets. And this is where sometimes you're looking at a document and you see anonymous icons in the document where people are accessing it who have not signed in. So that begs the question of how safe really is publicly sharing documents. It is possible that a document which is shared publicly could be discovered by randomly guessing the unique document reference. Each document has a unique reference. However, that is quite unlikely. There are somewhere between 44 and 64 characters in this document reference, and each has something like 63 different options. For the session today, we tried to work out how many combinations this is and how long it would take to programmatically test each one. But quite frankly, we gave up once we got to thousands of years, and we thought it probably isn't worth a concern. However, one thing that is of note is that there are other ways in which information contained in these documents can be accessed and how these links can be generated. We heard of a case recently where a user was reviewing their referrers information to their website, and they saw a link in there to a Google spreadsheet. So they clicked on the link, as most people would, and they revealed that the document was shared to anybody with the link. But more than that, they could access the sheet and they actually had edit rights to it. So it wasn't particularly sensitive information, it wasn't damaging, it wasn't private, but the principle remains. Use public sharing, either with or without a link, very carefully and consider it every time you use it. And we'll see later a way in which you can check which documents have been shared in this manner across all your users from your organization. When sharing to individuals or to individuals on the domain, anyone whom you provide edit rights to can add new users. They can make a copy of the document, so it's their own document from there on, and therefore they're capturing the information in the document, or they can download it if they wish. You can actually prevent this from happening when sharing to users with comment or view rights by checking these buttons in the share dialog box. And also remember that you can provide access to viewers and commenters for a specific period of time only. And this is really useful for documents which have a limited shelf life. Unfortunately, this doesn't work for publicly shared documents or for users with edit rights, as these are always available. But this can help prevent data leakage for documents and editors who have viewing or editing rights. As an individual user, you might be interested in see what documents you have shared, just so you can verify your own sharing rights. You can do this by using this particular search term in Google Drive. So it will find all the documents that you own that you've shared to somebody. You can't actually see who you've shared it to, so you don't know whether it's useful or not, unless you go into each document and check its sharing settings, which frankly nobody is going to do. And finally, remember from an administration perspective, there are controls available in the admin panel to prevent external sharing for particular groups of users. And this can help prevent data leaking from your organization if those users do not need to share outside the organization, for instance. So we've looked at Google Drive sharing top tips of some things that we've found out through our experience with our G Suite tip site and through our experience as a G Suite partner, how we understand users are making use of Drive and what tips they've come up with. The number one option really is to use Team Drive if it's available. So this comes with G Suite Business, Enterprise and Education editions, and it provides centralized ownership of documents. So instead of me as an individual owning a document, I kind of donate it to the Team Drive and it inherits the Team Drive sharing permissions. So this alleviates my concerns over the sharing rights on an individual document, and instead it allows you to set the permissions once for all documents contained within that Team Drive. So that is a very, very useful thing if you've got access to Team Drive. If your organization doesn't have access or doesn't provide access to Team Drives, then the next step down is to use Drive folders. And this is for the same principle. You can set the permissions at the folder level, and any document added to that folder automatically inherits the permissions of the folder. So again, you set it once for all the folders and assets contained within that document, within that folder. Another thing to bear in mind that sharing documents and folders to individual users is fraught with danger. This is because things change over time. You share a doc with John in HR, but he leaves that department and joins finance. So any documents shared to John as an individual will continue to be shared with him, even if it contains sensitive HR information. If the folder or the document was shared with a HR group, then John will be removed from that group and therefore no longer be able to access the HR document and the information they contain. So share with a group, manage the groups effectively, don't share with individuals. And we saw on the previous slide, just a reminder that sharing folders and documents to viewers and commenters can be time controlled, and this ceases access after a specified period of time. And then finally, just a reminder, avoid public shares wherever possible. If you take nothing out of the session today, just bear in mind where public access to documents is provided, either with or without the link. Both are dangerous. So in terms of using Drive, where can things go wrong? It all sounds like an excellent idea. It's great to be able to collaborate with users and to access the information and to have ideas rolling around the users. But essentially, things can go wrong. And these fall into two main categories. It's the fact that sharing needs change over time and the ability for your collaborators to share your information with their contacts can have a dramatic effect on your data security. So if you share a document with a user today, it might be a perfectly valid and good reason for sharing that document with them. They may no longer need or be suitable for access to that document tomorrow. Things change over time, but document sharing does not necessarily follow these changes. And in addition to this, you may be absolutely regimented and work to best practice in your document sharing. But what about those users you provide editing access to? So for example, if they move a document that you've shared with them into a folder, it inherits the sharing permission off that folder. And if that's one folder that they control, you don't know how they've shared it and what rights they've put onto that folder. So you've got the potential for data, your information, to leak because you've shared it with an editor without best practice. And leading on from this, every week it seems we hear about another data breach where hackers have exposed another customer database. Now, in the G Suite environment, the threat also applies to files like spreadsheets, where one of your staff could accidentally or maliciously expose personal data on your customers, your students, or your staff, or anything else, any other information which is vital to the business. And in particular for European-based organizations, with the onset of GDPR, this can have huge ramifications. And these include fines up to 20 million euros or 4% of global turnover, and class action lawsuits have been opened up for GDPR breaches. So both have potential consequences for great impact on the business for data losses. But even outside of GDPR, the brand damage and loss of confidence in customers when breaches occur can have devastating effects on an organization, as I'm sure you're aware. So these two issues do not surface immediately and are not easy to identify until now. The introduction of our Drive Permission tool helps us alleviate these problems. So how does it help? Well, it can help you to manage the sharing of documents both inside your organization and outside. It can identify which collaborators have access to which documents owned by your G Suite users and can then effect a change to cease their access. Administrators may decide that sharing of all documents to all users on a particular domain can be stopped immediately. So perhaps when your organization stops trading with a particular company, you don't want to share any more information with that organization. But it can also go the other way, where it can pinpoint individual documents shared with a single user, which the document should not be shared with. And this gives administrators and users a real great deal of flexibility and control over document sharing to prevent unwarranted information leaking into the wrong hands, especially for sensitive data and that which is shared outside the organization. So Collaboration is good, sharing information is good, but the control that you need to maintain security of data can be provided by the Drive Permissions tool. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to hand over to our CTO, Ian Weatherhog, just to demonstrate the Drive Permissions tool in action, just so you can get an idea of how that works. So Ian.
Thanks, Sean. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep, good.
Great. So here's the Drive Permissions tool on screen. You can see that it's from the same stable as some of our other Drive tools, copy folder and file name editor, which you'll be perhaps used to using. On the screen, I'm looking at the results of the Drive Permissions audit, which follows on from pressing the sync button, and the sync process can take less than a minute for this small demo domain, and up to an hour for a much larger domain. And I've got a big list of the people with whom my company's files have been shared. So this includes internal and external. And each individual row, like this one here, which represents this current user, you can see this user owns 662 files, and is also an editor or writer on another 294 files. There's a couple of hundred people registered in here, and if I put my domain name into the filter box, I can limit it down to the users within my domain. So these are all my colleagues and the odd group in there. So I can see, I could drill into a particular user to see what they've shared externally or internally. And if I change that filter to a negative, I can quickly see what I've shared with the wider world. So I'll just change that filter to Gmail for a second, and you'll see that we've shared some files with these Gmail users that we'll pretend we don't recognize. And I'll click on the first one. And a whole bunch of files. A lot of them look like test files, but secret stuff at the top. That looks a little bit alarming. And if I want to remove access to that particular user, then I'll just tick the box against the file, and you can see I can do multiple files at the same time. I'll click on share, and that user that we were looking at, that Gmail user, no longer has access to that file. I can also, so you'll see the numbers reduced there. I can also share at the user level. So this user here also has access to that same file. So if I want to remove both of those users or many users at the same time, then I can do that. So I'll unshare. It gives me a confirmation. Click OK, and it takes a little bit longer, and that's done. So, as Sean mentioned, if there's a company or organization that we're no longer doing work with, and we want to pop into the Drive Permissions tool, see what we've shared with them over the course of this project or previous projects, we can filter by their domain, quickly select all the users and unshare everything in one go, or perhaps selectively against individual users that we know have left an external organization. I'll come back to the top of the list and just look at a couple of special entries at the top. The first one is domain, and this shows me all of the files that have been shared to anyone on my domain. And there's no other way that we know of getting a report of all of those files, but there they all are. And more interestingly, the anyone is files that have been shared to anyone with a link. So I can see a bunch of images in here. I could step through, and maybe I'll filter by the odd keyword. I'll put in doc, and oh look, it's that secret stuff document again. So secret stuff has obviously been shared publicly as well by one of my rogue developers. And if I click the link, I can take a quick look at it. But actually, if I right click and open the link in an incognito window, you'll see I can get straight into the document, and yes, indeed, I've got edit rights. Quite a dangerous one. So I'm going to again just tick against that file and unshare that particular one. But I could do a lot of files, or I could remove all public sharing across my entire domain with a couple of clicks. I'll just switch over to the Drive tab, and just so we can have a quick look at what's been going on with that file in the activity. So you can see here where the owner, so that's not me, that's the owner of the file, under my instruction using Drive permissions, has unshared that particular file. And if I go to the sharing dialog, you should see that it's no longer public. So that's it. That's all I've got. Thank you very much.
Good, thanks for that, Ian. It gives us a really good example of what we can do with Drive permissions and how we can control them and how we can maintain them, which is the most important thing. Because it's, as I said, things change over time, and keeping an idea, keeping a handle on that is an important aspect of data security. Just looking at the pricing for tools, for Drive permission tools, sorry. We'll have a quick look at this. So every user on the domain needs to have a Drive permission license, and that's because Drive permission tool looks at all the Drive assets for all your users across your domain. So everybody has to have a license, and licenses are available on a monthly or annual basis. And we also have special pricing for education and non-profit organizations to reduce the costs there. I mentioned before a special incentive, and that comes in the form of we're offering 2 licenses for the price of 1 for the first 12 months when purchased before the end of February. So this incentive allows you to get hands on the tool, get using it, do some checks, understand what's going on with your data and how that's being managed and how users are sharing that data. And you can start that sooner rather than later. So start safeguarding your document assets. Okay, in terms of the next steps, we're going to follow up with an email, and basically you'll have this link on that email which gives you a little bit more information about Drive permissions, and that link also has a video which is a demonstration of what Drive permissions can do, very similar to what you've just seen with Ian. The email will also have a recording of this session, so you can either review it yourself or share it with colleagues if you need to. When you go to this link, just complete the form on the page, and this is basically registers your interest, and then someone from our sales team will be in contact with you, and we can discuss numbers and making sure that you're registered for that special offer. We would appreciate if you added in the approximate number of users that you have and your location into the comment box so we can allocate it accordingly. Okay, that's all we have really for you. Hopefully it's given you a good idea of what Drive permissions can do, and also how to manage your Drive permissions with your users. Hopefully there's some tips in there which may be of use for you. We're going to have a quick look to see if there's any questions that we can go through. And good, there are. So I'm going to Skyrim. Susan, can you control at the Google account level the ability for users to share files publicly? In other words, is there a setting so that users can share documents publicly? I guess you're looking to prevent that as well, Susan, which kind of makes sense. Mark, do you want to take that one?
I can take it, Sean.
Okay.
Yes, in the G Suite control panel, there's a setting which I think you showed earlier that allows you to prevent people from sharing files publicly outside the organization, and that can be done at across the entire domain or within individual sub-organizations.
Good. Yes, so you can do it either by individual OUs or for every OU in your domain, which kind of makes it very useful. Thanks, Ian. Taran, I need to know more about details in depth on activity tracking to shared members, especially on non-sheet based files. Taryn, can we come back to you, because that's quite a specific inquiry and question. So let me come back to you and we'll answer that for you. Susan, again, can you see what files are publicly shared? I think we showed you that in the demonstration. So hopefully, Susan, you preempted that that part of the demonstration with that question. Yes, you can. You can see what questions are shared publicly, and you get, as we saw in the demonstration, you can also see what documents are shared across the domain, which again is of interest. How do we get to the drive permission window shown in the demonstration, Megan? Drive permission is hosted on our Overdrive tool. So once you're registered, once you've got your licenses, then we provide you access to that platform. So you just access it through a browser, through authorized users, and then you'll be able to run your own checks and perform your own unshares, etc. Taryn, again, why does PowerPoint files not show all features in slide? Okay, can we come back to that, Taryn, because that's kind of Drive specific, but I know we do have an article about that kind of compatibility, so I'll come back to you. Margaret, is this a product developed by G Suite? No, it's not, Margaret. So we were quite short on time, so we haven't really done an introduction to ourselves, but we are Refractive, and we're a G Suite partner and have been for the last 8 or 9 years. And we run and handle the G Suite Tips site, which is a free hints and tips site. So we develop drive permissions, and we also run G Suite Tips, but we're an independent partner of Google. As I say, we have been for a while. Jonathan, G Suite allows you to block the download of entire folders. Yes, it does. So if I share a folder and I give only view or comment access to the folder and to the documents, then I can prevent that. Then I can stop the downloading of the entire folder, which can be quite useful, particularly for lots of documents. Taryn, a question about Keynote. Why can't we keep it? Yeah, okay, let me come back to that. I say we've got some information on that, which we'll follow up after the event. Okay, I think that's all the questions. I said we'll follow up with some information. You've got all the data that you need in order to access. You can follow up with more information. You have our contact details on there. So if you do need anything else, then we're here to help and happily talk you through those questions. Okay, thank you very much. Bye now.